It's called bell historically because the early diving bells were almost just like an inverted bell. The modern representation of a very early diving bell. There's a platform and the person is stood there with just their upper portion of the body in the bubble of air. And there's as crude as that, just a bubble of air. So you can see where the concept of a bell, the diving bell, comes from. The term bell relates back to these very early arrangements. And they've been used not quite since time immemorial, but certainly since very primitive sort of almost Elizabethan times, etc. So 1691, 1618, very crude arrangements. Now that's like the kind of bell I would have used in the 70s and early 80s. Very small, very crude, very basic chambers. Nothing very sophisticated about that at all. The modern bell is considerably larger, considerably more sophisticated. Those early diving bells from the sort of 70s and early 80s. But they've actually become slightly elongated because they took some of the early bells and basically they cut them in half and welded a belly band in, what was called a belly band, to make them larger. So the top would be hemispherical, the base would be hemispherical, but there would be a band in between the two to increase the volume. Typically 6 cubic meters is now the minimum. And they typically now have 2 entrances, or the trunking on the base the diver goes in and out of, but they have a side lock that enables them to lock onto the system, the saturation system on the side, and they're much better equipped. They've got capabilities to sustain the divers in a survivable environment in the event that there should be an incident where the bell is lost, disconnected from its umbilical. Unfortunately, in the 1980s, there were a number of incidences where they left the entire diving bell behind on the seabed with the divers inside. They knew they'd lost the bell, but it was very difficult to recover. They would try various techniques of attaching a lift wire, pulling it up to a shallower depth. But very often they were lost in bad situations, i.e. poor weather conditions. And so the ability to recover the bell became hugely hampered. I mean, there were a number of distinct diving accidents that resulted from lost diving bells. Never ended well.